With TBC Classic hype at an all-time high and people just hyped out of their mind for what's coming, Blizzard have actually done it. They've made an experience that people are clamoring for. The desire to jump back into one of gaming's highlights, similar to the Halo 3 launch, is on a lot of people's to-do list for this year, and TBC Classic is very likely dropping this year. And Blizzard knows that. So TBC Anniversary has people hyped because there's quite a few little changes to the best expansion in World of Warcraft's history. Not counting vanilla, but that's not an expansion, that's the core game. But what if they changed more from Anniversary to TBC Anniversary? And we're gonna cover things that could come, as well as the changes that are already there that make TBC Anniversary a much better experience than it was the first time around. So right off the bat, we have dual spec. From the get-go, everybody has access to that. Now, in original Classic and original TBC Classic, there was no dual spec. You effectively had your one class, you had to go in there, play it, do it, and if you wanted to respec, you had to spend the gold, the time, the energy, and for a lot of people it was really inconvenient. Nobody actually really wanted to do that. So if you're a PvEer, you typically did in PvP and vice versa. Dual spec alleviates one of TBC's biggest problems is it's not very alt-friendly. So when you now have one character that can do both things without it being a huge hassle, it makes the game across the board healthier, thriving, and just a better experience. So if you're a DPS player in your raids, but you want to run a dungeon because you want to help out a friend, guess what? Swap to tank spec, put on your tank gear, and jump into those heroic dungeons. Because guess what? You no longer have to wait in looking for group for 1, 2, 3 hours looking for a tank for shadowed halls. Yes, it's difficult, but guess what? Now you can actually do it. Same thing with PvP. If you're a PvPer, you're a rogue, you're going for your 2s, your 3s in arenas, guess what? You can do your PvP, and then you can just swap from PvP spec, I'm not a rogue player, to your PvE spec, assuming you find a rogue raiding spot, considering they're not the best PvE spec until you get your glaives. But that's one of many changes. For example, you have the Black Lotus change, economy change. In Anniversary, the economy was absolutely horrendous because of the botting issue. So Blizzard solved it. Not by actually targeting and handling the botting issue, they left that alone. What they did was they made it so Black Lotus spawn from high-level herbs, which means that in TBC, when certain high-level currencies and rewards are necessary from the open world, assuming you're in a PvP server full of bots with the flying, it's gonna be pretty horrendous, let's be honest here. They might alleviate it by making things drop much more, way more nodes, just making the issue easier to handle for the player base without spending as much money to hire GMs to actually handle the huge botting issue that Classic WoW has. Every version of World of Warcraft has it, and I don't think the devs actually know how to fix it. I think this is a Blizzard-wide problem. I don't think we're getting that addressed in TBC or retail. I just don't think they're going to handle it because it's too much of a problem that's not worth the money to solve. On top of that, you have slight tweaks to Anniversary. For example, you have Chrono Boon from the get-go. You have the PvP balancing. For example, no more honor decay. You have instant mail. These are small things, but the fact that they went out of their way to add quality of life effects to the Anniversary experience, knowing that people are tired of the constant no changes crowd and experience, they're going out of their way to make it a better, funner, smoother experience for the majority. So what exact change will we get in TBC? I'll cover that later on in the video. On top of that, we have LFG. Now LFG is not some huge amazing tool. You say you're looking for a dungeon, you list it there, people apply to it, you accept them like retail if you've done a Mythic Plus there. People apply, you pick the people you want, and you guys go into there. No summons, no nothing, you guys actually have to get to the thing, then summon people once you're at the entrance and then go into it. And LFG is a useful tool, not very useful in Anniversary itself, but in TBC it's going to be way more useful. For Karazan runs, for dungeon runs, heroic runs, with all the selling services, and there's so many of them, like honestly, you should make selling summons and boosts and everything in chat perma-bannable. That shit is horrendous in Anniversary. That's a different topic. But the LFG tool is probably going to be much more useful in TBC than it is in Anniversary. There's also a chance they add LFD from Wrath into TBC, but I'll talk about that a bit more later on, because that's kind of controversial, but it might be a change they implement. We then have mega servers. There is no bad options unless you pick the Oceania server. And what I mean by that, in original TBC Classic, there were a lot of dead servers. There were so many Classic servers, and even to now, if you go on Cataclysm, there's a whole array of dead servers that just aren't really worth playing on. TBC Anniversary has 2 servers, NA and EU. What are those servers? You have PvP and PvE, Night Slayer and Dream Scythe. Both servers are so full that there is no problem when it comes to finding groups, finding dungeons, raids. Whatever you're looking for, people are constantly playing, constantly looking for a group, and just constantly enjoying the world. The only choice you have to make is PvP versus PvE. On top of that, they've attempted to force faction balance. So what does that even mean in this context? And it's slightly problematic. I've had friends who haven't been able to launch on Night Slayer because they can't actually play Horde because there are slightly more Horde players than Alliance players. I think the current statistic is like 52 to 48%. So you have to log on at the very peak of like nighttime, 3 or 4 a.m. to be able to make a Horde character. Because they do try to keep the factions as balanced as humanely possible. On top of that, layering. On a PvP server, typically if you get on a bad layer, it's just 99% Alliance, 1% Horde, and it's a terrible experience. Except it hasn't been. On Night Slayer, I have quite literally watched Horde or Alliance walk onto my layer and then get layered off. I've had my friends try to join my layer. I watched them walk from the Baron to the Stone Talon and they get into a different layer. I've had friends try to gank me for the fun of it. And I've literally seen that on their side, they log on to Stonevale and boom, lay it off. So from a PvP server perspective, it's great. You're on a balanced layer. No matter what, the layer will always be as much as they can. There's always going to be error and like room for error and margins here. 50-50 to the best degree possible. That is kind of problematic when you are trying to play with friends because they might not even be able to get onto your layer to play on the zone you're looking for. And TBC, this might be even more problematic because TBC is not as big as Classic. There's not as many zones people are going to be in TBC. So think about the fact that you have so many thousands upon thousands of people in Hellfire. Hellfire on launch is going to be miserable. Imagine trying to do your endgame farms for runes and things of that nature and you're just like, I can't farm. This is not worth it whatsoever, so you just don't bother because there's 7 billion people trying to farm the one resource. On top of that, you have accelerated phases. Now, in the original Classic, that shit was almost 2 years long. Anniversary is just about 12 months, give or take, because it launched in last November, and the TBC Anniversary is going to launch around this November, October, December. So a 12-month cadence. So if you weren't looking forward to a 15, 18, 24-month TBC experience, you now get a 12-month TBC experience, give or take. They could still do 18 months, but on the lowest end, it's going to be 12 months. On the longest end, it's probably not going to be any more than 18 months. So it's much faster, much smoother. It's just an accelerated experience. If you don't like that, that is a net negative. But for a lot of people, people get burnt out of raiding and PvPing rather fast. So the phases being faster is actually healthier for the game. They've discovered this in retail as well, with these 18-month expansion cycles now, instead of 2 years or 2.5 years. Every 18 months, you get a new retail expansion. And it seems Classic is following that in those footsteps. So TBC will be 18 months, then Wrath will be 18 months, give or take. Assuming we do get a Wrath of the Lich King Anniversary. But now that I covered all the actual changes that make TBC Anniversary really hyped and people looking forward to it, let's talk about potential changes. Now, in TBC, there are pre-nerf and post-nerf raids. Now, when TBC initially launched, the raids were pre-nerf, and some guilds struggled, some guilds found it very easy, and, you know, the devs did eventually do the post-nerf later on. TBC Anniversary might launch with post-nerf from the get-go. Now, there's the caveat to that. It might make the raids too easy, because people have gotten better as we've played the game so much over and over again. But the Classic player base in general is not very sweaty, not very dedicated. So if they do post-nerf, they make the game more accessible to the majority of the player base. So from the health perspective of the game, I think post-nerf is the best bet. But from somebody that, you know, does like a bit of a challenge or anything like that, if you do enjoy the difficulty, the game launching post-nerf might make all the phases way too easy for you. A second change that we might get based on all these quality of life changes they've been implementing is experience buffs happening soon after launch. TBC is not alt-friendly at all. You need to go and do all your attunements, and I'll cover attunements in a second. So if they make experience come faster and more often once you hit your first 70, or they just do Joyous Journey essentially year round. For example, Season of Discovery has incredibly fast leveling, and it's led to a huge alt scene because anybody can level their alt as fast as humanly possible. On top of that, the next thing they might do is account-bound attunements, or make the attunements incredibly easy to farm. They might lower the rep requirements, they might lower the key requirements, they might make it so that the attunement necessary is removed after a month or so. So when you try to do an alt later on, you can just run right into the raid. or the dungeon or whatever you're looking forward to doing that the attunement is stopping you from getting into. Now, attunements are part of the friction that makes Classic good, so essentially fully removing them isn't great, but a lot of people look at what you need to get ready to raid or jump into content and they balk at that. And yes, an MMO is a grindy game and you should do that, but modern gaming has kind of changed a little bit, and convenience and ease of access is more important than actually grinding and putting the effort in. So this is something Blizzard has to actually check the balances for, if it's worth implementing, but I do think making attunements at least farmable for your alts on your main is something they should do. Kind of like Season Discovery, where you could send your Nixia neck to your alts. That would help a lot. This next one is controversial, but it might work to make the game better for the majority, and that's Karazan with a 3-day timer instead of a 7-day timer. Now, I'm not saying they should do this, but for a lot of people, running heroics isn't exactly the peak of content, and people love running Karazan. Karazan's a lot of people's favorite dungeon. It's a raid, but let's be honest, it's kind of like UBRS. It's a really big dungeon for the most part, but it's way more fun for a lot of people than spamming heroics. A lot of people don't actually make it to phase 2 or 3 or 4 of TBC. A lot of people do quit within the first phase, and Karazan's the funnest part for them. So making Karazan more accessible might make people stay around longer, but it could lead to the opposite, where people are now spamming Karazan multiple times over and over again because it's way better than heroics, it's more efficient. So I'm not saying they should do that, but that could be a fun change. At least maybe not the first month, but the second month of Karazan being open, they should make Karazan a fun thing to get your alts geared up and ready to go. They could also add badge drops much faster, much earlier, so that people can make heroics a funner experience and keep the dungeon scene lively for alt. Now, I'm not saying this is something necessary, because they do already make badges easy and easier to farm the longer into the expansion you are, but making a happy like that from the get-go could be a net positive for TBC. Again, I'm not saying for a fact that it will be. I'm just saying that badges should come faster, because a lot of people don't actually enjoy it. The longer into the expansion cycle you go, the harder and harder it is to find tanks or people for specific dungeons. Giving these dungeons at the end, once a day, 10, 20, 30 badges, whatever they want to do to make people want to grind them, is a dedicated and easy way to make sure people do these daily grinds. The Tarnish Undermine Real system in Season of Discovery showed that people don't actually hate dungeons, they hate doing things for no reason. So adding the Tarnish Undermine Real made Season of Discovery's dungeon scene at the endgame active 24/7. To this day, people are running BRDs, they're running Stratoms, Scholomanters, any dungeon you can imagine, people are running it, because they have a reason to. So adding the badges from the get-go effectively makes the dungeon scene never die off and keeps people playing and grinding forever. Now the final thing, LFD. I'm not saying they should add LFD, but 1 to 60 or even 1 to 70 leveling, I don't think LFD is necessarily a bad thing, because people saying they love the open world and hanging out with people and making friends, that's not really a feature of modern gaming. And I've said that before, but I feel like LFD isn't as bad to the game as it used to be. Especially on a mega server like Night Slayer and Dream Scythe and the EU servers, people don't really have that community or small server vibe. Especially when you're leveling, you're trying to get to 70 so you can do the end game. And especially with the accelerated leveling, just adding LFD only for leveling, not for heroic, no looking for raid, not for any end game content, but just 1 to 70 or 1 to 68 if you want to make it so that people can't queue the heroics at the very end there. Adding LFD could effectively make the game slightly better. Again, controversial, you can roast me in the comments, you can hate me as much as you want, but I'm just saying think about it. But with all of these changes coming, and some of these changes possibly coming, are you more or less excited for TBC Anniversary? Let me know in the comments down below, I'm genuinely curious. Thank you for watching. If you liked this video, like and subscribe. If you hated it, understandable. Dislike and subscribe and become a dedicated hater. You don't half-ass shit on this channel. Also, hate me live over on Twitch, Monday through Friday, noon to 4 PM EST. I will see you guys there. Ebonheart out. Peace.